So let's keep talking about trade, but just through the prism of what we've seen in the last couple of days. In your view, the latest salvo in the getting rid of Trump, I mean, the latest salvo is based on Ukraine. Does that make it more or less likely that he decides to do a trade deal with China?
I don't know if it makes it more or less likely he's going to do a trade deal with China, given what the House Democrats are doing. I think what the president wants to do is get a good deal for America's workers, for our factories, for our farmers, for our ranchers with China. And he wants China to obey the rules of civilized nation when it comes to respecting property rights, not trying to steal technology and use it for military or intelligence purposes. The president's focus is, as it should be, on getting that good trade deal with China, no matter what kind of hysterics you see in the House of Representatives.
But you've been in Washington for a while, and you know everything gets political. So you don't think none of this other stuff will have any effect whatsoever? How about USMCA? Is it possible we get that done with this as a backdrop, impeachment as a backdrop?
I hope so. Nancy Pelosi has said all along that she wants to pass the Mexico-Canada agreement. Bob Lighthizer, our trade representative, has been working in good faith with her for many months to give assurances to her and some Democrats in her caucus about enforcement mechanisms. I think Republicans in the Senate could live with those measures. I know Donald Trump could as well. Unfortunately, the House Democrats have been trying to impeach Donald Trump since the day he was sworn into office. I think they voted 3 times already on impeachment. I hope that they'll focus on doing the people's business, one important part of which is passing this Mexico-Canada agreement.
Yes. Just to get down and dirty, the Democrats would need 20 senators, I think, if they had all their own senators to go, if it does proceed to that level. Do you think that from what you know, from what you heard yesterday in the transcript, and I don't know what's going to come out with the whistleblower necessarily, do you think that this rises to the level of a high crime and warrants removal from office?
No, it's a little mystifying to me, and I think most Americans, now that they've read the transcript of the president's call with the president of Ukraine, exactly what the Democrats are talking about. In fact, Nancy Pelosi said one of the grounds for an impeachment inquiry would be withholding information from Congress and the people. Well, the transcript has been released publicly. I and members of the Intelligence Committee have reviewed the whistleblower complaint. I believe it's probably going to be released publicly in the next few days. I don't see why it can't be, with appropriate redactions for a few classified matters. And what's apparent is there's no quid pro quo, that the president asked for anything in return for U.S. aid to Ukraine. It was a fairly straightforward diplomatic conversation. Certainly, it's not what Joe Biden has boasted about doing. Joe Biden boasted on television about withholding American aid to Ukraine if Ukraine didn't fire the prosecutor that was looking into his son's company. And let's just be clear here. A Ukrainian oligarch didn't find Hunter Biden's resume on ZipRecruiter.com and start paying him $50,000 a year because he's an expert in Ukraine and oil and gas. He did that because Joe Biden was vice president of the United States.
Senator, let me ask you a separate question. If you find the Joe Biden side of this troubling, which, by the way, I think is hard not to, do you find anything about what the president did troubling? Not necessarily rising to a crime, not necessarily rising to a level of being impeached, but in terms of character, in terms of what it says, in terms of being the president in the White House, does anything about this trouble you whatsoever at all, or do you think that this is completely fine?
So first, I think the president has reasonable concerns about Ukraine. Ukraine is riven by rival factions. Those factions point the fingers at each other a lot. One thing the president wanted to know earlier this year, whether President Zelensky, a newcomer to Ukrainian politics, was going to be better than some of the past leaders of Ukraine, especially when it came to combating corruption.
Senator, I'm not referring to that piece of the transcript. I'm referring specifically to the piece of the call related to Biden.
No, this is my point, is that Joe Biden, as sitting vice president of the United States, went to Ukraine and demanded the firing of a prosecutor that was investigating his son's company. Otherwise, he was going to withhold $1 billion in aid. He boasted about that. He bragged about that. That was under a previous Ukrainian administration. Now, with a new administration, the president wanted to get to the bottom of whether or not it was more trustworthy, it was going to take a more serious tack on corruption, and whether there were past actions that needed to be reopened. I'm not saying that there necessarily is anything there. I'm saying that these are reasonable questions when you look at the facts of a sitting vice president's son getting $50,000 A month.
Senator,
it's a common topic of conversation between our president and presidents of other nations when we're dealing with corruption, and especially with aid to those nations.
You're not going to get anywhere here, Andrew. Senator, the whistleblower, you've seen it. So you've seen it. It's not public yet, so you've already seen it.
I have.
Okay, so at this point, what would it take to start flipping the 20? You'd need 20 Republicans, and I'm sure they're going to be pretty solid in their support. I don't know if as they split up, maybe Sass, I don't know, maybe Romney. But what would you need to see where you'd actually the president would start losing the support of his colleagues in the Senate? Or not colleagues, but the senators.
I don't want to get into any detail about the whistleblower complaint, although I do think it will be made public, and I don't think there's that much classified material in it. And I think it's probably best now that the transcript is public to make it public. I will say I didn't see anything in the whistleblower complaint beyond much of what's in the transcript that's been released publicly already and what's been reported in the news. And frankly, a lot of it touched on what's public news, not classified, sensitive material.
You figure that voters will have a chance, the American public will have a chance to litigate this in November of 2020.
This and almost every other issue that we debate all the time in Washington.